Hi, I'm Roger Struckoff with Cloud Expo, New York 2014. We're here today to talk about cloud computing, but we're going to talk about what I call cloud computing 2.0, meaning that a few years ago, cloud computing involved discussions of private, public, hybrid, where we talked about software as a service, platform as a service, XaaS, everything as a service, infrastructure as a service, service as a service, I heard somebody say. But what we want to talk about today is Cloud 2.0, meaning big data and the Internet of Things have joined the party. We think this is a serious development for enterprise IT. We're joined today by some great panelists who are going to tell us why. I'm going to look to my immediate left, your immediate right, and allow our panelists to introduce yourself. And what do you think of that topic?
So my name is Vanessa Alvarez. I recently joined Amazon Web Services. I spent 10 years as an analyst covering big data and enterprise infrastructure in general. When I think about Cloud 2.0, I'm just going to say that it is really all about hybrid today,
okay.
Right? It's hybrid cloud. The issue is no longer whether it's private or public. It's really about how you leverage each one of those.
Okay. All of the world is a hybrid. Is that a fair statement to say?
Yes.
Well, let's look down a little further and tell people who you are and what do you think of that topic?
My name is Larry Carvalho. I work as a research manager at IDC, focused on platform as a service, but my background has been seeing the whole evolution of the cloud. But what we call at IDC is something called a third platform, where people are moving forward from just using cloud as a place to go host their stuff to now leveraging it to change and disrupt fundamental businesses. And there is a lot of changes in Cloud 2.0, and those are based on big data and Internet of Things. And that's what a lot of companies are doing to leverage cloud technology to fundamentally disrupt significant businesses. Just like Amazon disrupted the book business, this is now going to a lot of different industries.
Okay. And our third panelist actually sells stuff to people. A lot of us analyze, but introduce yourself and tell us what you do, and then what do you think of this topic?
My name is Corey Isaacson. I'm the CEO and CTO of Code Futures. We have been one of the early innovators in the big data scalability space. We're now coming out with a new platform that will help with real-time big data platforms and streaming called Agile Data. And what we really see is the main thing is if you're going to put big data in the cloud, you have to make big data accessible to lots more people and usable by a much wider audience in the enterprise. It's time to get past the data scientist and batch processing and really get into a real-time stream so we really can take advantage of all this data as it's happening.
Okay, let's go back to Vanessa a bit. You mentioned about hybrid cloud, and I said all the world's a hybrid. Let's talk about that. Is that true? What do you mean by the way you look at things?
So kind of to piggyback on what Corey just said in terms of putting data and analytics in the hands of everyone within the organization, it really is important. When I was spent some time at Forrester looking at the big data space and looking at the analytics, it really did start off with Hadoop and batch processing. I think today, the real value sits in real-time analytics for a lot of organizations who are focusing on, time to market and value. So the quicker you get to market, the better it is for the business in general. What do we do? Do we hire data scientists who come in and specialize? And it's interesting because the topic came up earlier in another panel about specialization versus generalization. Today, we want to be able to put easy to use tools in the hands of everyone within the business, right? Whether it's a marketing team, whether it's business analysts, each one of those individuals has a different use for these tools. Still doing analytics for the business, but they have a use for these tools. Today, also what I see is businesses will either leverage public cloud for analytics because they don't want to make the investment in hiring a data scientist or buying more infrastructure and CapEx investment. But at the same time, they also have a lot of proprietary and confidential information and data, which they are doing analytics on, so they may want to keep it on premise or maybe leverage both, right? At certain instances within that process. So that's really what I mean when I think about analytics in a hybrid environment. Whether you're leveraging public for specific, analytics, or whether you want to keep it on premise, that's really where the decision comes in. But today, data needs to be accessible for everyone.
Yeah, let me follow up a little bit on the idea of data scientists. Corey mentioned it too, and we'll get Larry's view on this as well. Don't want to hire data scientists. What do we mean by that job title? Is this someone just out of college? Is this someone who's been specifically trained for many, many years? How clear cut is that title and what they're expected to do?
Yeah, if you look at a data scientist, obviously right now there is a lot of need for people who just understand basic analytics, and that is going right into the business realm. And you have a lot of business schools and MBAs coming out with that. The challenge is, do you need a lot of technical skills to start to get value of all the data you have? And I think the term data scientist is going to start going away with the amount of deep skills, with so many companies making it easy to start extracting intelligence from raw data. And I think that's what is going to happen. But still, you need to understand what value you got, what data you got, and what kind of information you can leverage from that to change your business.
But are these people that need to be coming out of college with this, sort of pre-trained education, or is it something requires more time in the business, Vanessa?
So, kind of what Larry said in terms of MBAs programs combining the analytics and the business aspects of the program. It really is about being able to do analytics and understanding the value that it brings to the business. And I think that's really today where it's two separate people. It's a data scientist and a business analyst. Those two roles combine. And can happen much faster now because you have easy to use tools like Code Futures and the new platform. But the reality is that the person who needs to have those tools is the person who is making a business decision. And making it as easy as possible for that person to use these tools is fundamental for me.
Okay. What do you see in terms of your customer base, Corey, when it comes to data scientists and learning curves and the type of people that need to get involved with it and where they're coming from?
Well, we have, certainly some customers that are using data scientists for specialized, queries and early research, and that's a critical role. But the thing that we're seeing is that to really get value, we have to actually get everything into the hands of the business user and the operational people, even things like CEO dashboards and things like that. And the biggest problem that we're seeing is that the typical view of big data is when people are looking at it, you're looking at it as a big mass of data and you're going to go crawl it and try and pull something out of it. And that's a very, very inflexible way to look at it. It's takes a lot of processing, a lot of horsepower. The data volumes are getting so big that that's just not going to work anymore. What we really need to be able to do is look at the data in a stream-based way, in a much more agile way, so that we can really pull out what we need as it's happening. And then that makes it really easy for lots and lots of people and a much wider audience to take advantage of it. So like I said, a CEO dashboard, something like that.
When we started talking about big data at Cloud Expo a few years ago, it's a tough thing to define. And some people think of big data as the old-fashioned epidemiology, meteorology, that sort of thing. Not a real-time aspect to it. Now, you mentioned there is a real-time aspect to a lot of this big data. To what degree are we then grappling with creating silos 2.0 with all of this big data? Do you want to have a shot at that?
So from my perspective, big data is, first of all, the problem is becoming because of the growth of data.
Yes.
So you've got tons of information with a lot of very valuable metadata that comes out of it, location, other information that you get of each person interacting with big data. As a result, that kind of information about all the data you're getting allows you to make a lot better decisions. Making a decision weeks later or anything is not value. So right. the information has to come as soon as possible. And can you get that decisions made at an appropriate time based on what is changing is the differentiator between businesses who leverage big data properly and those who don't.
But who's going to make that decision to go down the right path the right way? And that has to come from the top, I think.
Yes, absolutely. It does come from the business analyst. It does come from the business user. And they got to say, hey, am I going to increase my revenue in my store because I know the kinds of people who are coming into my store? Where are they walking towards? Am I going to change my layout of the store tomorrow based on how my sales was there yesterday? Those are the kinds of things. But yes, it has to come from the top to say that we are going to change how we do business and how we react to market realities based on what is happening.
Well, now, Vanessa, what's the poor enterprise IT manager supposed to do? Because, a few years ago, we were talking about public, private, maybe versus, and evolving into hybrid constructions. That's a lot going on there. Yeah. These people have already been hit with a complete retooling of how they're supposed to do enterprise IT. And now we're telling them, well, you've got to get all these petabytes, exabytes, many bytes of real-time data and process. What are they supposed to do?
So this is data deluge, right? There's so much data out there right now, and the business user marketing teams, I'm sure Corey knows this as well, probably a user, is a business user, is telling IT, we want all this data. I want to get all of this data into our business here and be able to analyze it, right? From social media channels, from the sales team, from the field, so on and so forth. And they want to be able to do analytics on this data to be able to make decisions faster. What IT is challenged with right now is whether they leverage their own private data centers to take in petabytes worth of data, or do they leverage public cloud? Right, and that's where players like Amazon Web Services, Rackspace, Terramont, some of these other public cloud service providers bring value to analytics, right? Because they can bring in petabytes worth of data, or if the organization feels that they need to bring the data into their own private data center, then the question becomes, do we make the investment in infrastructure to be able to manage all of this data?
And that's the thing. How important is the cost, and how do the people even get a grip on the cost, let alone trying to do ROI on it? I mean,
that's the challenge that enterprise IT faces today, and it's certainly a business decision that comes from the top, right? Whether you're making the investment, and analytics is a core to the business value, right? You're making decisions for future product, for future services, and ultimately ends up being a revenue stream. So you make the ROI of the CapEx investment and determine whether it makes sense to buy, and bring in that infrastructure into your own environment, or do you leverage a hybrid environment, right? Where maybe you put out some data into the public cloud, do some scrubbing of the data, and then bring it back to do more real-time analytics, with tools like Code Futures and Agile data.
I'll try to simplify things just a little bit from the vendor's perspective, or the technology developer's perspective is a better way to look at it. I live in Illinois. There's a university there, Illinois State University, which has a very strong program trying to produce data scientists. And that's because they live right next to the headquarters of Caterpillar. And they also live next to John Deere and a few insurance companies. Caterpillar, which just makes big machines, is hiring more data scientists apparently than almost any company in the world right now. And they're saying, I was at a seminar where they said, well, your data scientists don't know anything about business, and your business people don't know anything about IT. Now, these are 22-year-olds coming out of college. What's your experience in designing, and what do you see that duology or that problem?
Well, that's a fascinating example, actually, a company like Caterpillar. That's exactly the kind of thing that I'm most interested in, is really making it practical from a real business standpoint. So if you take a company like that, there's big data streaming from the factory floor. That would be a huge place to get data from. So you could actually do quality control. And
that's one of the issues, and they're talking in terms of millimeters and fractions of a second and all sorts of
That's right.
things
That's
like
right.
that.
But also, their capital equipment is very, very expensive for their customers. sensors. And so you could imagine that with the Internet of Things, you could put all kinds of sensors into the equipment
Right.
itself, and you could actually start to monitor failure rates and operational characteristics and all kinds of things that would be fed back into the engineering team, for example, to make the products better or solve problems in the field. The level of support you would think that they could offer, let's say you have a big construction project going on and you have a bunch of Caterpillar construction equipment. If something actually happened, if you had the right setup with big data, you actually could detect problems probably before they happen and keep people operational much more. That would put them in a category all themselves.
How do you go about hiring these people is the thing I keep going after. What is that?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that these systems are just too difficult to work with and too inflexible. It really shouldn't be that hard, right? Because how complicated really is the data that would come off of a tractor, for example, or the data that would come off of a flat?
There's a lot of it.
That's right.
But it's not necessarily that
Exactly.
complex.
So if you had tools that would let you say from a business operations perspective, I want to monitor that oil pump, for example, and I want to know if it goes out of a certain threshold, that ought to be a relatively easy thing for someone to set up. And it shouldn't take a PhD to figure that out and be able to do it. So
I'd like to also add something to that, and I think it goes back to the people part, right? Which is IT. For a long time in cloud, IT was afraid that their jobs would go away. It in fact increased the number of IT jobs in the industry, right? What happened was that skills evolved and IT needed to learn some new skills. We saw the same thing with virtualization. We're seeing it happen with cloud. We're seeing it happen in the big data in analytics space with data scientists really becoming that sort of business analysts and data scientists in one. And hopefully these MBA programs who are much more forward-thinking are realizing that in educating that kind of role. Because at the end of the day, when you think about enterprises, they're really all about automating large parts of the business. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that by automating you're getting rid of IT. It just means that IT becomes a sort of manager type of role.
And it seems the jobs are, we really are swimming upstream every time. It's not like it's getting simpler, it's getting more powerful, actually.
Yes, it is. And having the right tools in place to make it simple to use and be able to add more value to the business is really, in my opinion, what needs to happen in enterprise IT.
What do you think of that, Larry? Do you agree with that?
I agree, and one of the things is you brought up the example of a very real company. The focus of companies is going away from a lot of issues, not going away. Time used to be not as important. Now time is it's going up the level of importance for everybody. So if you think about the amount of data, can you get information out of it in a reasonable amount of time, or is it going to be so much time? And sometimes that's just not possible without leveraging the cloud technology, whether it's public or private, doesn't matter. The question is, how fast can I get it? Is it going to be worthwhile? And that's a business decision, and those things, you don't just have a choice with the amount of data that is being thrown at you, and you have to modify your behavior to be able to handle that.
Okay. Well, speaking of time, we've run out of it. If you found this broadcast on Syscon TV, you'll also find the contact information for all of our panelists. So from Cloud Expo East in New York in 2014, thank you for joining us.